Now we're live, Bob.
Let's go.
So with a little delay, the internet was just spinning and spinning and spinning, but here we are, live on YouTube. We are gonna go live on Facebook too, so just give us a minute here. And that should be Facebook countdown. And so we are live both on YouTube. Oh, see, Facebook spinning too. Give us one moment so we can be live on all social media platforms. Our internet has some issues today, but we will get through it as usual. What do you do when they don't cooperate, huh? The online people.
They're not there.
They're not there. They're not home. They're saying it's Saturday morning.
I'm getting nervous.
We're not-
I'm getting very nervous. Have a couple of tall Budweisers out here while we're on.
Yeah.
So are you still swimming?
No, I've not been.
Because of
I took
COVID?
a long break after the record, and then I wanted to start again. And I started somewhere in December. Was very hard to get back into it, and then finally, when I started to feel the water a little bit again, we got this COVID stuff. So
what's your next record? What's in what stroke?
probably the 100 freestyle. I wanted to go to the 2021 World Championships in Tokyo, but I don't know if they're going to be postponed because they postponed the Olympics from this year to next year.
I think they're going to regret that. I think everything's going to be moving forward.
Yeah.
Football, soccer, everything.
Except the Olympics now are gone. So we may have to skip Facebook and put our YouTube link there later
Oh my goodness.
because it's not.
I'm going home.
Yeah, it's done.
I got to be first to my problem. This is going to be good. This could be very, very good.
Facebook is freezing up, so we're going to give it one more minute. If not, we'll
We're
just
going to
go
give
live
it
on
one more
YouTube.
minute, and then we're going to beat it up.
That's right.
This is how people get nervous when they're on TV. They make them sit in the green room
That's right.
for hours and hours and hours and
All
hours.
right. Well, we're just gonna go. There's my buddy. We're just gonna go. Let's see.
We want to go on YouTube too.
We are on YouTube.
We are good.
Yes, we are on YouTube.
We
And
might
we're ready
wanna
to
go
rock
on
and
YouTube.
roll. All right. We apologize for the little delay, but Facebook is not cooperating, so we're gonna go straight on YouTube. And today I'm very excited. We're not really going to talk about health this time. We're going to talk about a totally different topic. And with me, a very good and old friend of mine, Dr. Bob Baer. Good to see you again.
Good to see
we
you,
have
Doc.
a lot of good stories together also. We'll probably insert a few of those. But Bob is a professional archaeologist, terrestrial and underwater. He'll explain later what that means. Actually, he's also a Vietnam vet, so thanks for serving, Bob.
Thank you.
He's an author. He already authored 5 books, and his 6th one is coming out or being published very soon. And he has so many degrees and so many education when it comes to this archaeology, history, heritage management. It's way too much to talk about. But since 1977, I was a little boy then, 6 years old. Bob completed over 250 professional archaeology and cultural research investigations, both again in the underwater and terrestrial environments. And he also did some anthropological investigations, mostly South Asia, Pakistan and Afghanistan, right?
Afghanistan and Pakistan, yes, sir.
Yes, very, very good. So we're going to talk with Bob here today. Very interesting stories, very interesting adventures. He loves to write books. We're going to ask him later why he wants to write those books, and we're going to go have a good, fun hour today with Bob. So, Bob, welcome here.
Thank you.
How did you get this archaeology bug? When did you get interested in all of this?
When I was about 12 years old, my father went to Pennsylvania. And his father, my grandfather's brother, had been an anthropologist, archaeologist with the Smithsonian.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd gone to Central America, 1927, 1929, and he had died there. Something bit him, a snake or a spider or something like that. So I never knew him. My dad knew him. So my dad brings back this trunk. And it's full of papers and books and pottery and things like that.
Uh-huh.
He said, this is from your Uncle John, your great Uncle John. I said, well, what's this all about? I didn't know about it. So I started looking at this and reading the reports. I went to National Geographic and stuff like that. So from the time I was about 12, I had the bug and I said, that's what I want to be. You know, I don't want to be a forest ranger or something like that. I want to be an archaeologist. So I better go to school and I better learn. And I did it because I was not a good student before that.
Okay. And what's the story about the little boy bringing water to some people here in Florida?
Probably about the same age. If you're from Miami, there's a tourist attraction. It's called the Ancient Spanish Monastery.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody really knows about it. It's in North Miami. It's out of the way. So I rode my bicycle up there, and they were taking these crates off of trucks.
Mm-hmm.
And I hung around there, and I saw these stones and rocks coming out of it. I started talking to people, and these had belonged to William Randolph Hearst, the publisher, Hearst Castle in California, Patty Hearst, the granddaughter who got in trouble, with terrorists back in the 1970s or something like that. So I started reading about Hearst, and Hearst was interesting. He was a collector. He collected everything. He sent his agents, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, to Spain to buy monasteries in Spain, take them apart, and bring them back to the United States because he was going to use the stones to use it on the outside of Hearst Castle at San Simeon in California. So I said, this is something else. He was also a great collector. I've always been interested in that. Mm-hmm. Every day for 2 hours, he would get Christie's and Sotheby's catalogs, and he would order. And he would get these things. Some of them he would never see, but they went into storage. If you saw the movie Citizen Kane, it's really about William Randolph Hearst. So I was looking for a dissertation at Oxford for my master's and doctorate. And I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell the story of the lost monasteries of William Randolph
So
Hearst.
that's your book. Was that your first book?
This was not my first book. This was like my third book.
Okay.
I don't know which came first and which came second.
You don't remember. Now, your education, Bob, from Georgia Military College all the way to Oxford University. Tell us about that. How did you get there?
I went to Georgia Military College, 6-year school. After 6 years, you got an associate degree, which is not a bachelor's degree, but you got a commission in the Army. And this was Vietnam era. So you had 2 years to go someplace else and get yourself another degree or go in the military. So I said, guess what I'm going to do? I told my parents, I'm going to Oxford. They said, you're nuts. I flew over there. I went, I taught my way into it, and I got an undergraduate diploma in local history. All history is local, Mike.
Yeah.
Local history. So that's what I did. And that got me through the military years. I came back, and over the years, I went back to Oxford and other universities to get these degrees. But as part of the degree, I always wrote something. I wrote a thesis. I turned the thesis into a book. So it wasn't time wasted.
Yeah, correct. Very good. Now, how long were you in Vietnam?
I was in Southeast Asia and South Asia for 9 months. I first went to Korea. I went to Army Language School. I used Korea. I learned a Korean. The Koreans were our allies in Vietnam. So I went back and forth from Korea to Vietnam with Korean military troops who were going into action in Vietnam. So that was my military part.
Yeah,
that's what I did.
Very interesting. What about you came back from Vietnam, post-Vietnam? What happened then?
I went to a university. I got a doctorate in cultural resource management. Went to work for the university, the Nova Oceanographic Center at Port Everglades at Fort Lauderdale. I worked there for 20 years. Allowed me to go off and do the archaeology work because that was part of my research.
Yes.
I taught underwater archaeology at Nova. That's what I did.
So you must be a good diver.
I'll tell you, that's very interesting. I'm a competent diver. This is another book, Anomaly 27. This is a lost ballad, SS Copenhagen, and that's me. But diving is really not my passion. Diving to me is the way to get from one place to another underwater. Yes. So I'm not the world's best. I'm not the world's worst. I'm a competent
But you
diver.
do it a lot. You have to for your job then, basically.
I have done a lot of diving, yes, sir.
So you were in that Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. I also heard that you, at one point at least, were a Miami-Dade homicide detective. Where does that come in the picture?
This is what happened. I got back from the military, and I was going to graduate school at the University of Miami, and I got a job as a lifeguard with Dade County. So from my job as a lifeguard, I got what's the best word to use? I got. They said, why don't you come and become a sheriff's deputy, Dade County Public Safety Department?
Because of your military background.
That was the word I was looking for.
Yeah, recruiter.
Recruited. So I said, yeah, the money was about the same, but I was always interested in forensic archaeology, okay, which was crime scenes and the weapons and ballistics. And of course, a lot of bodies are dumped out in the environment.
Sure.
Buried. So forensic archaeology is an also very narrow area where you go out and you work with investigators to work the crime scene.
Specialized area.
To specialize in that area. So it was a lot. I have to be
careful. So how long did you do that?
I actually did that for a long, long time. Because when I was at the university, I also worked part-time, full-time with other police agencies. At Dade County first, North Lauderdale Police Department, Town of Davie Police Department, and the Seminole Tribe of Florida, a police department, which I'll talk about later.
So when there was a crime scene, you came along?
I often did. If I was called, I did, especially diving jobs. Back then, they didn't have a unit that did all the diving. So when cars were dumped in canals,
then you had to go and check it out.
We check it out, what's in it. Tow truck would come out. I towed the truck out of the...
He reminds me a little bit of Dexter, but he was a blood pattern analyst, right? It's a series on TV. It's also in Miami.
Yeah.
But very, very interesting.
Yeah, well, that's forensic. Forensic has to do with legal. Yeah. Okay, so I did that.
Yeah, very good. Now, that experience, basically, you decided to write your first book, which I believe was a novel, Movers and Shakers. Is that correct?
Movers and Shakers. This is the cover. I thought my work with Metro Dade, the sheriff's department, would lend itself to the movies. So when I was at the university, and this is interesting, if you want to write, what you have to do is write. I know you're a writer. Every day you have to sit down. If you write a paragraph a day in a year,
you'll have your book.
You've got 365 paragraphs. And sometimes once you start, you can't stop. You write,
you keep going.
So I wrote this book, which was about Miami in the 1970s and crime, especially something called the armed home invasions, where these people, they would look at homes on the Intracoastal and up on the beach, and people showed off their thing, art collections thing. Then they make house calls and they rip them off and sometimes murder them. So that's what this book is about. I was lucky enough to sell this book, which I published through Lulu.
Yeah.
If you ever want to publish something, you write it up, just go to Lulu, pay them a few dollars in it. But I use this to market the book as a possible home box movie or something like that.
Yes.
I eventually sold it.
Okay, very good.
I eventually sold it. So it wasn't wasted time. But I did this at the university. Every day I'd write a paragraph.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point for the listeners too, because I talk to so many people, interesting people, and they want to write their book, Bob.
Everybody.
But they think it's this very, very unsurmountable task. But you made a good point. If you just write a paragraph a day, before you know it, you will have a book, right?
Just sit down and start to write what you're interested in, automotive repair, an adventure you've been on. Just start writing it. But what people don't do, they don't take the time and do it. Force yourself to do
Consistency too.
Consistency. It's a habit. Every day do
a little bit.
And guess what?
Yeah.
The clock starts ticking, and after 365 days a year, you probably got a book. I'll show you that later.
Yeah, very good. Well, yeah, I've been publishing some books, and in the beginning it was kind of a nightmare because those publishers, they had a lot of money, the editors, a lot of money, the communication is no good. But today, you're right, Bob. My last few books, I don't need any help. I don't want any help because they don't do it the way you want to do it. They leave mistakes in there. They own all the rights. They make all the money. So there's many platforms today. You just write your book and you submit it and self-publish it yourself. My books are KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. Very easy to do.
That's interesting. Writing is a business. So what you're doing is great because you see people, and if you got a consult, what's it hurt to give them a book?
Yeah, exactly.
My goodness gracious, would you sign it, Dr. Van Thielen? Because your protocols are in there. They can do that. That's one way of doing it. Now, there used to be a thing called Vanity Press, and that was looked down on. If you self-published, but a lot of books, there was a sort of a spiritual, cultural book called The Secret.
Yes.
And that was self-published, and that had on legs, that became an international bestseller. The person made millions of dollars and things like that. So it is a business. I can tell you something about that too. What I've done, I've gone to small press history, Signum Ops. If you go to Amazon.com, I put in Lost Monasteries, Robert H. Bear.
Yes.
And then you can go to Signum Ops. You can go to their website and you can see
all
the
your
books
books
they
are
do.
there.
And they've done some beautiful, beautiful books. That's not Vanity Press. That's small press. It's not Harper and Row. It's not the big New York people. It's like a university press.
Okay.
In every state, University of Florida Press, University of Alabama
They have their
Press,
presses.
They have theirs.
Interesting.
But they don't sell a lot of books. I don't think they sell some.
Yes.
But if you're an author, what do you want to do? You want your book out there.
Yeah.
I go on consults. I do on work, and I say, have you ever been to the ancient Spanish monastery? Dade County. That's where it is. And they look at me, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
And I say, well, here's the book. Would you like to have this book? It's about the monastery. They say, would you give me it? I said, sure. Would you sign it? I said, I'd be happy to. I sign it. Then they call me, and they said, I took my children to the ancient Spanish monastery.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. It's not Disney.
No. Well, it's education.
It's not South Beach. It's not Key Biscayne, but it's the ancient Spanish monastery. It's beautiful. Lots of weddings there and fashion shoots. Nice people run it. It's a church now.
How many archaeological, what a word, right? Exhibitions, exhibitions have you been involved in, Bob?
Exhibitions, meaning
projects. Let's say projects.
Okay, that's interesting. These books would be the big projects.
Yeah. So every big project you decided to write a book.
Well, okay. You said 250. Of those 250, most were work-a-day.
Yeah.
All of these books were written following archaeological reports. So what I do first, if I work for someone, I do a report. That report goes to the government. Okay. I try to make it interesting. I try to find something. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I don't. What I do, if it's interesting, then I said, is this worth a book? The Jupiter shipwreck was worth a book. The Copenhagen shipwreck was worth a book. The Cape Canaveral shipwrecks were worth a book, so I went and I wrote books. Now, if you want to be put to sleep at night, read an archaeological report.
That's right.
It's not written to be interesting and exciting. It's written for the government to look at and say, was there something there?
It's data.
Or was there something not there? And what's the status of it? So what I tried to do was this, I had this urge to write.
To make it an adventure?
To make it an adventure.
Yes.
And I got a big one I'm working on now.
Yes.
Which I hope is big, big, big. But it was that urge to tell a story, to connect with people, and say, this is our cultural heritage. This is our cultural heritage.
Right here in Florida.
Exactly.
Now, which one of those would you say is your favorite? And tell us the story.
Just like children.
Yes.
You've got these children. You wouldn't say your favorite. I think my heart really lies with Lost Monasteries because I was little. I saw my great uncle there, Uncle John there, my dad.
It has more meaning, personal meaning to you.
This was interesting. I tried to sell this to the monastery as a church, and they wouldn't buy it for years.
Yeah.
Then one day I got a call, and they said, "We're not going to write it. We've tried to write this book for 10 years."
And you already did.
No, a decade I did. I said, "Thank you very much. How many do you want?" And every month they buy books and they sell them in the gift shop.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Yes.
Europeans like the book. It's architectural history, art history, buildings archaeology, and archaeology. It's all those disciplines in one.
Now, the government is trying to stop treasure hunting. Explain to the viewers the difference between treasure hunting and the things that you do for the government, etc.
Okay, this is interesting. As we know in Florida, there was the Mel Fisher Group, Atocha Santa Margarita, 1622 shipwrecks, 1733, 1715, and 1659. The San Miguel the Archangel was 1659. When these treasure hunters found this shipwreck just south of Jupiter Inlet in Palm Beach, Florida, they went to court, they got an admiralty arrest. As part of the admiralty arrest, they had to have oversight by the state of Florida. Oversight by the state of Florida meant they had to hire a professional archaeologist who would agree to work with treasure hunters.
That was you.
I was the guy. Whereas a lot of archaeologists, they're treasure hunters. They're finding the treasure, they're going to sell it. It's not politically correct. I've got my ethics and everything like that. Well, guess what? I was doing a job for the government, part of the regulatory process. If I didn't do it, who would do it? And there'd be nothing, there'd be no story.
Yes.
So this is the story of the treasure hunt. It's an analysis of the artifact. It's everything. If you've never been on a treasure hunt and you want to go on one, I would recommend The Last Voyage book because it's an inside. It's not. It's an inside story. And listen, the Palm Beach Post was there every day writing articles about this.
Yeah.
I saved my records that I sent to the government and things like that. I saved the Palm Beach Post articles, and then I wrote the book. But I really like this.
And that's your best-selling book too, right?
You know what? This is interesting. I don't keep track. This is Jupiter Inlet. And at one time, the shipwreck, if you read the book, the shipwreck was under the public beach.
Oh,
really?
It was
eroded away, and for years, for 100 years, people saw anchors out there and cannons out there. But until the treasure hunters went out there and got the admiralty arrest and started to excavate, this is the dredge that's doing the beach renourishment. So as we know in Florida, the beaches are they pump more sand back on the beach and more sand back on the beach. But it's a very interesting shipwreck from the point of geology and archaeology and coastal management. It's very, very interesting.
Oh, interesting. Now, Texas Treasure is your latest book.
This is the latest book here.
Texas Treasure. Tell us about that.
Now, this is interesting. This is not the final book. I don't have it yet. This is the gallery.
This is the one that's going to be published. It's final.
It's at Amazon now.
Okay.
So Texas Treasure, Robert H. Baer. Okay, they fixed it. They put the H because there's another Robert Baer who does spy books, and so I don't want to be confused.
You don't want to be confused with a spy now.
I don't want to be confused with him. So this is interesting. There was this young guy in Texas, 1960s, and these guys hired him to find these shipwrecks. They've been finding coins on the beach. So he went out there and he searched around. He did the magnetometer surveys, and he found one of 3 vessels on Padre Island. It took him 90 days to salvage that vessel. He got Mendel Peterson from the Smithsonian to be the archaeologist. He excavated that in 90 days. He did a pretty good job back in the day then. Underwater archaeology was just starting, things like that. After he was done, the state of Texas came in and confiscated the treasure. They said it belonged to the school children of Texas.
Yeah.
Belonged to the public. Well, he went to court and he fought for years. He made a settlement with the state of Texas.
Yeah.
But actually the shipwrecks, the 3 shipwrecks, in the history, after they were wrecked, they thought they were very close to Mexico and they were going to walk back, the survivors, or they were going to walk back to Mexico. Well, they didn't make it.
Huh.
They were killed by the Indians. So it's a very interesting story. So
So
this is the latest one. It's out.
And it's available on Amazon.
What's that?
And it's available on Amazon already.
Amazon Books.
Amazon Books.
Texas Treasure, Robert H. Baird.
All right,
Yes, sir.
Texas Treasure. Interesting. Now, you recently also, because your wife is a big promoter of you too, made a guest appearance on Expedition Unknown with Josh Gates.
Josh Gates, yes.
Entitled Treasure in the Atlantic. Can you tell us about that story?
Well, as you can tell, I'm very nervous on camera. I'm not really a born actor or anything like that, but that was interesting. And that's about a shipwreck I'm working on off of Melbourne Beach, Florida. And
right now?
Right as we speak. This is a very interesting shipwreck. The part that I was on, I went down to the Tampa Museum and I looked at the pistol down there that was on loan from the state of Florida. The pistol and an accompanying musket, and they were found 2.5 miles apart in some plates called the Montero's plates, and a silver knife handle and a cannon, all kinds of things there. So as we're talking now, they're out there working. I'm doing the same thing with them. A seafarer, they're called Seafarer Exploration Corps. I do the monthly reports. I get the artifacts. I write the reports on those. And hopefully someday, if this is perhaps a missing 1715 vessel, there could be another book. I don't know. And
if for the viewers, if you say 1715 vessel, who those shipwrecks, who belong they to? Are those the Spanish?
Let me ask you a question. Do you know where the Treasure Coast is?
The Treasure Coast, that's the whole Space Coast.
It's below the Space Coast. It's from Sebastian Inlet south to Fort Pearson. It's about 35 miles. Okay. That's where in the 1960s, a fellow named Kip Wagner, he was on the beach. They started finding coins. He designed a surfboard that you could look through. It had a plexiglass thing. They found it, and there's at least 6 vessels or more in the shallows along that 35 miles. That's why that was designated the Treasure Coast.
The Treasure Coast.
We've got the Gold Coast, which is Miami. We've got the Treasure Coast. We've got the Space Coast. We've got the First Coast. We've got the Nature Coast.
Yes.
So all these parts of Florida have been divided up into coast. But that's a very interesting. And if you're interested in that, go to Sebastian and go to the McClarty Museum. It's on the beach up there. And they have a lot of the artifacts. We don't like to use the word treasure.
Yeah, artifacts.
The artifacts from the shipwreck.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And where are these all Spanish ships? Where are these ships?
These were the Spanish 1715 fleet that left Havana, catching the conveyor belt called the Gulf Stream that would take them up to the Carolinas. Then they would turn to the east and they'd use the westerly winds to go back to Spain.
So how did they wreck?
Hurricane.
Really?
They were calling a hurricane. Absolutely.
Okay. That's interesting.
It is interesting. Tragic.
Tragic, yes. Let's see here. So that's the book that's going to come out. You also wrote a book for the military.
I did.
What was that all about? Is that passing it on?
This was interesting since I was in the reserves for a long time, and my background is anthropology and archaeology. In America, the degree is an anthropology degree, and the anthropologists are archaeologists oftentimes.
Okay.
When you go to the UK and Europe and everything, the first degree is an archaeology degree. But you've also got a background. So this is very interesting. This is about the Afghan wars. If you're interested, you can get this online. Probably it's called Passing It On. If you Google my name, Robert H. Baird and Lester Grau, Grau, you can get a downloadable version. And what the military wanted to know, they wanted to know about the enemy, which was the tribesmen in the northwest frontier of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and they're called the Pashtun people. That's who the Taliban is drawn from. So my job was to go over there, and since I'd worked earlier, remember, I told you about working with Native Americans. That was on my resume and my background in the archaeology. So I was first hired by the Justice Department, and the money came from the poppy eradication program. And of course, these guys, they grew poppies, and you know about poppies. Poppies are used for making.
That's Afghanistan.
And America was against that. Okay. Then Department of Defense. And then I went to Fort Leavenworth, not as an inmate, to the Foreign Military Studies Office, which was a great institution there. And that's where I put the book together for the military. And it's really an inside view of the tactics. Now, the British fought there for 200 years almost. The Russians fought there for a decade. Remember, we took over from the Russians, and we've been there for decades. So this book says, what is the strategy? The strategy's never changed. The Taliban tribal strategy has never changed. The weapons have changed. The weapons are more deadly. IEDs, roadside bombs.
And so actually you went to Afghanistan in person?
I went to Afghanistan in person, and I won't say trained with, lived with, and studied the Pashtun tribesmen. And I was a guest. If you're a guest, you're safe. If you're an enemy, you're done. But if you're a guest, you're safe. I got along with them fine. This was part of the American foreign policy. There was another group called the Human Terrain Team. I was also involved in that, and that was sending anthropologists to military units in Afghanistan to help them understand the local people. Now that makes sense, right?
Yes.
Anthropologists, they study tribal, they study the people, and they did that. But that was really exciting.
So is it fair to say that this is Know Your Enemy kind of book?
Yes, it is. Know your enemy and respect your enemy. Even if they're your enemy, you respect them. And
culture-wise.
Culture-wise, yeah. And militarily, they're good fighters. Okay? And the United States will be there. I'm not a policy person, but is the United States going to leave like the Russians left, or is what are they going to do? I think the future lies with helping them in the farming, to get rid of the pop growing, to do something else and make it normal.
Okay. Very, very interesting, Bob. Very interesting.
A little bit.
Let's see. What about, because it's been many years, I don't even know many, but I have been at your house, and Bob's house is like a museum itself. I mean, I remember some, what you call artifacts of Afghanistan and many other countries. Tell us a little bit about treasures or artifacts, same thing, right? Tell us a little about it. And I know you brought one too.
Well, this is interesting. Specifically, I did bring, as I said, I have worked with treasure hunters. One of the people that I worked with was Mel Fisher. If you've been to Key West,
I've been to Key West, but probably not to.
There's the Mel Fisher Treasure Museum down there. And the Mel Fisher, he went to Christie's. I can just show you. These are, this is a little bit controversial. Here we go back to the archaeologists. Now, archaeologists believe that you shouldn't own cultural material. In other words, you visit an Indian tribe and they've got things they're making a thing, that's okay. But shipwreck material, buried material, if it's on private property.
Yes.
Okay, that's the key. If artifacts are on private property, they belong to the property owners. If the treasure hunter goes to court and gets an admiralty arrest, okay, and excavates the a shipwreck, there'll be a division. 20% of the artifacts will go to the government, which is interesting. 80% will go to the treasure hunter. I don't see that as a conflict of interest because those 20% are the best artifacts and they go to museums.
Museums. Yeah.
That's what we want. When you say my house is like a museum, that's a little overstated. There's things there that over the years. Like
no, I want you to explain it. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, like a canonized.
So that's the 80%, which are not the big pieces that are in museums, but still things found at the shipwrecks, etc.
80% like a Jupiter.
Yeah.
80%. Okay, what do the treasure hunters want? Do the treasure hunters want gold bars and silver bars? Yes, they'd like that, but the government tends to take that. What the treasure hunters really want is coins because coins are marketable. Coins can be made into jewelry. Okay, coins, even if it's a bad strike, is worth something. Okay, if you've got a 70-pound silver bar, Mike, what do you do with it?
Yeah,
are you going to melt it down into something else? No. The purities, they say, what are you going to make? You're going to make little bars out of it and sell them. You can, but a 70-pound silver bar is $12,000 to $15,000, something like that. What are you going to do with it? Gold is different. So you can use that as a hedge on money or something like that, but it's difficult. So this division has always been something that's been controversial.
Yes.
But the state gets some and the treasure hunters get some. Dr. Baird doesn't get any of that.
Okay.
I get paid because I'm doing the job. I'm writing a report.
You're paid to do the job.
Yes.
What about our little treasure here?
But you wanted to see an artifact.
Mm-hmm.
This is a reproduction of a cup. Here you see a silver cup.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reproduction. And this is the Christie's catalog. And there's one like that. And it's got the pricing here. I'll let you say what the reserve is. What do you see on that?
$20,000 to $30,000.
Yeah.
For
Now,
that cup?
if I went out and I tried to sell this today for $20,000 or $30,000, I couldn't do it. It will sell at auction or nowhere else, or to a collector who specializes in something like this.
Yes.
So there's the auction. If it's if they meet the reserve here, it's sold, and then afterwards they publish, the price is realized. And in here you could see that number 50 sold,
Mm-hmm.
and it sold for $28,600. So somebody out there back in the day, what was this? 1988, a long time ago. Paid
that money.
$28,000.
That was a lot of money that time.
Collectors.
Yes.
Collecting his change.
Now tell us about this cup. What are we looking at?
Well, okay, it's obviously a replica of a Spanish cup. It would have been used by the elite on the ship, or it was probably going back to Spain, okay, to be sold. So this was probably cast and forged and made in the New World. It was part of the cargo on the Atocha, Santa Margarita. It was going back to Spain, and someone owned it. So just to be careful again, it's very controversial, very controversial. Auction houses have really moved away now from treasure because it's so politically incorrect. Yes. And UNESCO doesn't want it going on. You know what that is? United Nations Educated, Social, and Cultural Organization. So the pendulum swings back and forth. It's politically correct or politically incorrect, right?
Yes.
But it's controversial. But it's interesting. And without this system, we wouldn't have the information.
Correct.
Okay, without this system, you know, I couldn't have done the Jupiter shipwreck. Whereas the state archaeologists and others, they're not going to touch something like that. They don't want to do it. Okay, I think the information is well worth it.
Yeah. I mean, I know you're working at Jupiter still. What are your next projects? What is next for you?
Well, this is interesting. I've got an East Coast shipwreck,
and
what's next for me is that's my cue. That's my cue. Let me move on to this because we don't want to. The next book, and this is interesting. If you're out there listening, I'd like you to Google Across the Everglades, UCF Archives, and you'll get like a 1905 copy of this book Hugh Willoughby called Across the Everglades. It's beautiful. So in 1896, an adventurer from Rhode Island, Hugh Willoughby, came to Florida when Florida was frontier. And what he wanted to do, he wanted to go across the Everglades and see what was out there.
Yeah.
A lot of people said, well, they've already been out there. The military's been out there during the Seminole Wars and everything. He said, no, I think there's stuff out there. There may be lost civilization. There may be giant snakes. There are giant snakes now.
They're still there today.
There weren't giant snakes then, okay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I said when I was a little guy, again, isn't this interesting? I always loved this book. And you'll like the one that's online. What I wanted to do is I want to do an update. So we're saying from 1896 to 2000. I mean, I'm not.
Is that your one paragraph a day, Bob?
Well, I just want to show you. Listen. Work is about product, isn't it?
Yes, sure.
And your job is about product. So this is the second version of
that original book, 18.
Yeah. Well, look at this. Okay. So what I did was, this was the Everglades in 1896. What has happened to the Everglades from 1896
till today?
Everything. Okay. The ecosystem, this has been ruined. The Tamiami Trail east to west,
Yeah.
Alligator Alley, east to west, the Seminoles as a tribe, things have happened to them. So what I wanted to do was using my own experience as a Floridian, a person from Miami Beach who grew up there, who went on these adventures. And the Everglades was only about 12 miles from my house then. You know, Miami Beach, if you go 12 miles to the west, okay, you're out in the wetlands now.
That's where everybody goes on the airboats now.
In the airboats, the tourist attractions. And there's a disconnect now. You're a European guy. I was telling my wife on the way up here that what you guys, when you come to the United States, you want to go to Senor Mickey, right? Mickey Mouse?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Number two, what do you want to do? What's the next thing you want to do?
Maybe Miami or the beach. Yeah, the beach.
My beach. But a lot of people interested in ecology and natural history, they've always heard about the Everglades. What is it? Because you don't have these vast tracts in Europe.
Well, they want to go on an airboat and see the alligators for sure.
They do want to do that.
Yeah.
They do want to do that. Now, okay, what I've done is I've said, you know, the legend of the big snake is in here. There was a legend that there were big snakes out there, but there weren't.
Okay.
There were snakes out there, but not the big snake.
It was a legend at that time.
When did the big snakes, as you've all seen on TV, get out of captivity in South Florida and get into the Everglades? I know, and it's in this book. So what I tried to do, this book is the core. If I could just drop this down in this a manuscript. So I retold Willoughby, and Willoughby sailed the coast of Florida. He went to the Barrier Islands of Florida. He hunted crocodiles in Florida. But says, well, there's no crocodiles in Florida. Yes, there is. There's the American crocodile.
Yeah.
So, and then what I did was I told his story again using his language and his dialogue, and then I put in all the other stuff, all the new stuff, all the way along, trying to write this as a popular press book that I could take to an agent. And okay, here we're talking about, if we want to talk about money, you got to have an agent and you got to have a publisher, and they will see a book as a bestseller. Yeah. And they'll make it a bestseller.
And that's what you're working on.
I'm working on the book. Okay, to make this, it's not an archaeology. It's a little, there's archaeology in here.
Sure. It's more history than anything else. And ecology, maybe.
Natural history, ecology. It's multidimensional. And that's what I'm trying to do with this.
What's your timeline on that? Because now everybody's interested, right?
Well, this is interesting. Let me show you this here. This is the map.
There's
Florida. So Willoughby comes from Miami and he sails down past the Ragged Keys, and he comes around, he sails all the way around here to the Shark River and Harney River. And what he wanted to do, what they did do, he's got his sidekick Brewer, who's like an outlaw. Then canoes they came across, across to the Miami River.
Huh, interesting.
It took him a month.
Yeah.
It took
a month to cross through the river. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's many miles. How many miles is that?
It's not far, but you're in a canoe.
Exactly.
And the sawgrass stopped them. It's a real adventure, but if you go online, like I said.
Yeah, interesting little book.
Fascinating little
18
book.
What you said? 1870s?
1896. Okay.
1896.
1896 was the expedition.
And the updated version's coming soon.
I think it's going to take another year.
Sure.
But what I'm saying was this is not going to be published just to have it published. I want to have this.
You want to have this
where
to
there's
be
going to be some international readership, if that's okay.
That's okay, Bob. So you're in your 70s and you're still diving shipwrecks, you're writing books. I mean, that's pretty interesting.
Who said 70s?
I said that.
Okay.
You look 50s, but you're in your 70s. I know the secret, but that's because
we're amigos.
He married his wife, Jody Nylander Bear, of course, and Jody is what I call a relentless health advocate, really trying to people minute in, minute out, again, relentless, trying to keep them healthy, get away from drugs and surgeries, etc. So, Bob, how did your wife's interest for health impact your life?
This is interesting. To do my work, I have to be in good shape.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do when I go out on my jobs 3 or 4 days a week, I'm out there doing the digging myself. I show up at a job. I have to show my business card with doctor on it because I look like a workman and I work with workmen.
Yes.
I like.
So you're not delegating, you're digging.
We're out there digging. So that keeps you in good shape. And then walking and jogging and running And diet, of course.
And I know she juices for you both. She makes the juices. Do you like those?
I like fresh food. Yes, I do. You're embarrassing me.
What do you mean embarrassing? You got to stay in shape. I know she takes care of you.
Yeah. And I think we've seen with COVID here that if you're in good shape, they say that, older people, or that word elderly people and people in nursing homes, I think that's one thing we all want to escape.
Sure.
We're
you
not
gotta stay active.
We're not,
You're not only active, Bob. You're outside. You're getting the sun. You're getting the fresh air. You're getting
the ultraviolet rays.
The vitamin D. You get it all. Another thing. I don't know how many years it goes. Maybe you can say me. But as part of promoting health, you actually helped out a few years ago, and you did what I called a mega walk. Tell the viewers about your mega walk that you did.
Every year on my birthday, which will remain a secret, even though you've exposed me here. I do a 50-mile walk on the beach from Matanzas Inlet down to Ponce Inlet, which is exactly 50 miles. I do it on the beach, and I do it just because I can tell from year to year. Am I going slower or faster? And you've actually been on this.
50 miles. And one time I was supposed to go, but of course I chickened out 50 miles on the beach. So I basically caught up with Bob here in Daytona Beach. I only had a few more miles to go, but we arrived at the same time, but he did all the hard work, right?
It was great. I appreciate it.
It was good. Anything else you would like to share with our viewers today, Bob?
Well, this is interesting. There's one book I'm not going to talk too much about. It's called 100 Giants. 100 Giants, like the New York Giants. New discoveries, the French Huguenot experience in Florida. And as we speak, there were some shipwrecks found recently off of Cape Canaveral, and there's going to be some litigation going on. This is not a secret. It's been in the newspapers and things like that. So if you Google Cape Canaveral shipwrecks, you'll see about it. I wrote a book before the case actually was went to court. There's nothing controversial in here, but it's very, very interesting. And this was the clash between the French Huguenots in 1565 and the Spanish under Pedro Menendez. And Pedro Menendez was relentless. He's a conquistador who founded St. Augustine. And the French went up to the St. John's River just about the same time. And they got into a conflict.
Yes.
And the Spanish prevailed. And the French ships, several, fled south, and the Spanish chased them. And these artifacts, there's a monument.
From the French ships. Yeah.
There's a monument and bronze cannons. It's fascinating. Plus that mind-numbing.com. Why is Matanzas Inlet? Because that's where they were massacred. That's where the French were massacred. And the reasons we found that was the belt buckles and shoe buckles that were eroding out of the sand dunes, and that was the only thing left. Because the acidic sand eats up the bones and everything. But for years, shoe buckles, iron.
They came up.
Iron.
Yeah.
They were found. So we think we found the site of the Matanzas massacre. So this is really about the French in Florida and the Spanish in that conflict from 1565. And very interesting.
Interesting. So, in your opinion, how much more is out there? Like how much percent
That's
of
a
the
great
things?
question. Let me tell the audience this. Okay, if you took all the currencies of the world today, dollars, Deutschmarks, Reichsmarks, francs, rubles, yen, if you took them all, computed how much it was, all the currencies, what's lost underwater, the value of what's lost underwater, using this word again, precious metals instead of treasure, there's more lost underwater.
More lost underwater.
And I believe there's got to be people that salvage responsibly. And you can't go out there and loot and things like that. But I think with some government oversight and some regulations and a competent archaeologist, this can be done. So I think we're coming to a head here with treasure hunting. I think treasure hunting is either going to be over or it's going to continue. But you don't want it done on the sly, do you? You don't want it. There's lots of cases I can tell you about where they just went out there and they took it. And that's not right either.
No, that's certainly not right. I mean, we all love those movies when it's about treasure hunting, right?
The Deep.
Yeah. Many
Nick
good
Nolte,
movies.
Nick Nolte, remember that movie? That's one of the best movies on treasure hunting.
The Deep?
The Deep.
Okay.
Jacqueline Bisset and Nick Nolte.
Yeah, yeah.
1970.
Well, we all know the movies with Harrison Ford too, but that was more like an action adventure. Raiders of the Lost Ark, right?
But there's some truth to those too. There is some truth.
They're all based on some historical
It's
facts.
like Josh Gates, Discovery Unknown. This guy is really interesting. Okay, that's the show that you talked about. I was on for just a little bit with the pistol and the musket. That he goes everywhere, and it's a travel log, and he does some good work. And sometimes he finds things, and sometimes he doesn't. But it's the journey that's important.
Sure.
It's the adventure of going.
Yeah. Last question. A few years back, you were talking about a possible hidden city. I think you call it the White City or something in Honduras.
Interesting.
And we were actually, me and a friend of mine, Dr. Carter, were talking to Bob and we were saying, Bob, don't you need some guys to go with you to go on this adventure? And then Bob said, guys, we would have to be dropped out of a helicopter. We would have to, negotiate or get a guide from those indigenous people. And then we don't know what we're going to encounter. So are you up for it? And I guess he kind of scared us. So what happened with that? What happened with that?
This is interesting. This is going back to my great uncle's days. He was interested in that. It was a legend of La Ciudad Blanco, the White City.
The White City.
La Ciudad Blanco.
Honduras, right?
In the jungles of Honduras. Now, there have been several books recently, and they found some ruins back there, but not a ruin of the city. So is it going to be like the Mayan architecture with the pyramids and things like that? Probably not. But there was something back there. Many people have looked for it. Many people have died look for it. But there's a couple books out there. There's one that's interesting called Jungle Land. Jungle Land, Jungleland. It's very, very interesting.
And that's about that city. Didn't you say you only really could see it from up in the sky?
Here's what they've done now. There's something called LiDAR. Okay. Everybody's seen this. If you fly over Yucatan, where all the pyramids are, southern Mexico, and you're shooting LiDAR down, it goes over the jungle, and you can see jungle, and then jungle. So what they've done, they found huge amounts of pyramids out there that they'll never be able to excavate because they're so far out there, and they're in there, and they don't have the money. The problem with that is the looting of the pyramids by the people who live in the area who need the money from selling the artifacts, and that's really frowned upon. I think if the artifact, let me tell you something, this is interesting. If you go to a flea market or you go to an antique store and you see something and you know the value of it and it's got $10.98 on it or $29.95, would you buy it? Would you buy it?
You mean if it is worth a lot more, if you have the knowledge?
Of course it's worth.
I guess you should buy it and maybe get it to where it belongs.
If you're interested, you wouldn't. So I can see that if something's out there and it's lost, it's a lost artifact, it's in an antique shop or flea market or something like that, buy it.
Because nobody even recognizes.
If you want to, if you don't. But I even think they say, no, nobody should own that. And that's not right. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, I don't think so either. It actually would be better in the hands of somebody that knows what they're having or what they're looking at or what it's worth.
There's something called rescue archaeology. Rescue. And what does rescue mean? Exactly, it's like rescuing people. You see someone on the street, you want to give them $10 or homeless. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with taking them to a shelter? It's because you're rescuing. You're doing something good. So I feel that rescue archaeology is, does that artifact have anything to say? Many hardcore archaeologists say no. It has no value because it's lost its provenance. It's lost it. It's lost the place where it came from. You have the bones and you have the pottery around the bones. And you got the jade. And you got, well, maybe yes, maybe
no. Okay, very interesting. Thank you very much for listening. This was very exciting, Bob Baer. Thanks for your time. We are looking forward. I mean, people can easily, type in your name, Dr. Bob H. Baer. Robert H. Baer. You can find all his books, very interesting stories. And of course,
he can contact you.
Everybody can always contact me too, and I can give them your information too. A lot more coming out, obviously, hopefully by next year. This may be an international bestseller. We hope. I know you are. I mean, you don't stop till it's done. So we know it's going to be an international bestseller. And then you can all say, I saw Mr. Bob Baer on Dr. Mike's Topcat. I know he's very, very modest. That's why he doesn't like to be in the spotlight.
We're telling a story. And listen, anybody could do it. If you've always wanted to write that book about whatever, write it.
Paragraph by
start.
paragraph.
Paragraph by paragraph.
You don't have to do it all in one day.
No.
That's how he's doing it. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.